the 132nd episode of CloudFocus Weekly for the first week of April 2013. This episode is titled Getting Things Done. CloudFocus Weekly is sponsored by Arkus, cloud computing experts. I'm your host, Jason Atwood, although today I'll be playing the role of a non-host, an interviewee, I guess. And joining me is the interviewer, Justin Edelstein. Justin, how are you doing today?
I'm super ecstatic about this.
It's funny because we've been doing podcasting for over almost 3 years now. But
we've been
before
doing this podcast,
right. We've done another one where we have 182 episodes of. So if you add up 132,
that's not a weekly.
Not a weekly, right?
It's actually been out there for 6 or 7 years.
2007 we started that. And I would admit it's funny that someone brought this up to us, suggested this topic, and then it's actually one of the more. We'll see if it's a great podcast, but I've been excited about this podcast.
I'm glad that you're excited. So I'm gonna kind of play host here.
Okay.
I'm the Frost to your Nixon. And I'll be interviewing you about GTD, about getting things done.
Sounds good.
It's a hot topic.
Hot topic. Watch the podcast just go through the roof.
Yep. So let's just shout out first, since we are a customer company. Scott Hemider mentioned both of us on, I believe, what was the Dreamforce portal.
It still is the Dreamforce portal.
Okay. And said he has a request for a future podcast, and he wanted it to be about getting things done. He mentioned maybe doing a blog post too, but I think that this is actually a better topic to be discussed, as did he, so we're in agreement. And as he also mentioned, it's more for you, since you're more of a expert than I am in the deep arts of GTD. So Scott, just a quick shout out, he's a fellow MVP. He's also the founder of ArrowPoint, Force.com product development company. You can search for ArrowPoint on the App Exchange and you'll come up with all sorts of neat little apps. I've known them more for geolocation type of applications, but I searched and they have actually quite a few other things, like a user adoption dashboard and a auto V card and an info center. So check those products out.
Big shout out.
Yeah, it's a nice shout out for Scott. So
and we will do a CloudFocus Picks of the Week at the end.
And we'll do a picks,
So if you want to skip forward to the end and figure it out.
Well, I'm not picking one of Scott's picks because I just threw them all out there.
That's true.
You can go check them out on your own. So, all right. So, my introduction to getting things done was way back in 2005. And in 2005, I'm not going to say I started doing GTD in 2005. I'm just going to say this was where I heard about GTD. It was 2005 when the two of us worked at the large company that shall remain nameless.
Yeah. I'm going to let some secrets out of the bag on this podcast that I'm thinking about for days, like whether I should talk about. So,
all right. Well, will the name of the company be named?
No.
Okay, good. It remains nameless.
Yeah.
So you threw this book on my desk because I worked for you.
Yes.
I was your employee. And like a faithful employee, whenever your boss throws a book on your desk and says, read it, I said to myself, who is this David Allen character and why should I be reading this? And you were just like, just read it. It's good for productivity. I think you'll get a lot out of it. And I think I read the first 3 or 4 pages in typical Justin fashion and then just sort of gave it back to you. Fast forward a few years, I did end up reading it. I've also listened to the audiobook version of it and have also listened to a number of other David Allen, whether it be podcasts or audio discs or anything like that. We'll get to those later. So, I finally did myself adopt some of the principles around the philosophy, as I'll call it, of getting things done. And I won't say that I'm a black belt. I won't say I'm a white belt either. I'm somewhere in the middle, probably closer to the white belt than the black
pink belt.
Pink, sure. For breast cancer awareness.
There you go.
All right, so you gave me the book in 2005. But where did you hear about it, and when did you actually read it?
Okay. I heard about it. So here's the story, and I've told the story to a couple people. I actually told it to an employee at Arkus the other day because we were talking about this type of thing, and I was like, I just wanted to give the backstory. So in 2003 and 4, I went through a period working at this big company, and this is why this is going to be shocking news. I went through a period of time where I was a tremendous procrastinator. And not the type of procrastinator that's like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. But like, I knowingly didn't do things that I knew that needed to be done. I didn't do them, and I felt bad about it, which we'll get into David Allen and what all this means. But one of the things about procrastination isn't not doing something. Procrastination is not doing something and feeling about it. And I had sleepless nights. I would feel sick to my stomach going to work. I would see emails and ignore them or to delete them immediately because I knew I hadn't done the thing that I was supposed to do. I could have done it. I just wasn't. Something in me, I don't know if it was whatever age I was at the time. I don't know where it was in my life. I mean, I could probably think back 2003, 2004, where I was. I just had this procrastination bug, and I couldn't get over it. I don't want to say a sickness because it makes sickness sound, less important, but I didn't do work. I didn't do things intentionally.
And this was back in 03?
03, 04. I'm trying to think because I know when I picked up the Red Book. So it's in that time period before I got GTD. Let's just say before I got GTD.
Okay.
Before I got the book. And so I went on for a while, and enough to the point where it was starting to affect my job. It was starting to affect a lot of things in life.
So let me ask you, was this stuff that
it's funny because you don't even, it looks like you don't know the story.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Was this stuff, and this is why this will be a better interview because I don't know the story. Were these things that you were procrastinating about at work, or were they in your home life, or was it a mix of the two?
It was everything.
Everywhere. So both home life and work life.
And a lot of it was work. A lot of the stuff at home.
Work is everywhere. So
but I'm saying like I had a 9-to-5 job. I would go in, I'd sit at a desk in an office, and I would do work. And
this is before YouTube, so like you couldn't even be procrastinating looking at YouTube videos or Facebook.
I think we still had IM at that point,
yes.
So I could procrastinate doing other things. But I was a very, very bad procrastinator. I was that guy who wouldn't get back to you for a long period of time, and you're like getting shocked because you're like, I can't imagine.
I don't know this person.
I know I was, and I felt really bad about it. I mean, again, sick to my stomach, like. I couldn't this is a weird way to put it, but I almost felt paralyzed. Even if I had one task to do for the day, I had to go in and flip a switch. Now, again, I don't want to get too much into my job. I mean, not that they're going to give me a bad review or anything. That was a joke. I could get away with it, but like I wouldn't flip the switch. All I had to do all day is I wouldn't flip the switch. I just wouldn't do it. And I'd feel bad about it, and I'd sit there and I'd go do other things, and then I wouldn't flip the switch.
So I would say that's what inspired you to make a life change at that point.
So this is the story. So then I started to go, I did what everybody in the world ever does when they're having, and it came to a point enough which I actually realized I needed to help myself. And I thought, Google. And I typed in procrastination, dealing with procrastination. I Googled the crap out of it. What do I do? And somewhere in some thread, some
corner of the internet,
up pops Getting Things Done. GTD is the acronym, which we'll use from now on, Getting Things Done. GTD by David Allen. And I read some reviews, and maybe I read it on Amazon, and I went, click buy. Here you go, ship it to me. And I don't think I was a Prime member. And I got the book, and I read it. And there are literally moments or pages in that book that just went and blew my mind and went, oh, I get it now. I'll say
we're gonna get into the methodology later on because I want to keep going with the background story stuff, and this is really
riveting podcast.
You're blowing my mind.
Okay,
so you bought the book on Amazon.
Bought the book on Amazon.
Did you read it immediately?
I did. I was so
you did not procrastinate with reading the book.
I don't know how to put this though, like to make it seem strong enough without making it seem more serious than it is. I was in desperate need of help. I mean, I wasn't an alcoholic, I wasn't a drug addict or whatever. I was a procrastination addict. I was procrastinating a ton, and I was doing no work and feeling terrible about it. And again, it was starting to affect I was making excuses. I was pointing to other things and saying, oh, it's here or there, or it's not I was doing everything that a procrastinator or that like a drug addict would do to say that they don't have a problem, but I was doing all those things. So when the book came out, I'm like, I'm going to read this book because I figured, hey, why not read the book? And again, we'll talk about the path, and it wasn't like read book, problem solved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So I answered that question.
That's okay. so you read it kind of right away, and just out of curiosity, throughout the years, and this is now, we're talking maybe 9 years, how many times have you actually read the book?
So I've read, now see, he's produced 3 books.
Well, we're going to talk about, just talk about
so the
getting
actual
things
book,
done.
getting things done. Well, again, we'll get
I
into
know they
like
all kind of tie together, but let's two
of them very well, one of them not so much. But so I've read Getting Things Done twice with my eyes.
And you've listened to it?
I've listened to it. I used to have a thing to do to read it every year. It was one of my things. I wanted to read it every year. So I'd probably say I've read it twice, and I've probably listened to it maybe 3 or 4 times. Because, as we'll talk about, it's become my less favorite of the 2.
Okay.
Of his 2 books. So I was answering the question.
You're a great interviewee. So now, just getting into it, how long do you feel like it? Should we
tell what it is or no?
Well, we're gonna get to what it is, because
all right, I won't read ahead.
I'm just don't read ahead. We're getting there. There's a method to my madness. How long do you think it actually took you to get something out of the methodology that is getting things done? And then once you answer this, we're gonna get into what it is.
Okay. Instantly, by reading the book, I had clarity. So it's almost like, religious, but I had clarity. At least there were some things that he said, some ideas that were so absolutely dead on that they immediately unblocked channels in my head, right? That all of a sudden I went, oh, that's why. That's not to say that instantly took forward into the productivity person that before you. It took years, and when you're making a joke about black belt, I mean, I don't consider myself black belt at all. I consider myself still a disciple. I still consider myself someone who is practicing and trying to do something. But again, we'll talk about what it is and what it means.
At the same time, though, you do coach people in the black arts of GTD.
I do coach people, and it is it is something I've helped many people with GTD. I've given it to, I've almost made every employee I've ever had read it. And some people have taken into it more than others.
Some have actually read it, some haven't.
Some have read it, some haven't. And you're right. At this point, I coach people and teach people about it. I write blog posts about it. But again, I consider myself a very productive person, and I consider myself someone who can help others, but I don't consider myself like, I don't know, black belt just seems like the top, and I'm not one of those people who says, I'm the top of that thing.
It's like a Six Sigma black belt. I'm not putting Six Sigma down or anything, but it seems like,
everybody's one.
Well, you could be a Six Sigma black belt. You could be a GTD black belt, right?
If they had a certification, I'm sure I could pass.
Okay.
How's that?
So you could be a PMP or a GTD.
Well, if I had a GTD certification, by the way, David Allen,
you're missing out.
I'm trademarking that. I'm trademarking that idea right now.
You can pay for that. You can certainly charge people
charges
for it.
$200 or whatever, and a course and everything. Okay.
Yeah. So, all right. So now that we've gotten to the point where
everybody's turned off this podcast.
Now that everyone's flipped it off except the real GTD geeks, and this is a question not for those people.
Right.
So now you're getting stuff out of it. Why don't we now just take a step back and tell folks
what it is?
What is it? What are the key concepts? You don't have to go too deep into it because it can go deep, but let's stay high level so that people get people can get a little understanding of what it is and what it stands for and the history maybe behind it.
Right. So I'm gonna try to not read like what GTD. There's a whole sentence. Again, Google it. There's tons of stuff. I'm gonna do a little bit on like what the top level is, and then I'm really gonna mean what it means to me.
Okay.
And how I would explain it to other people. So GTD, Getting Things Done, is a productivity methodology that helps you organize your tasks and thoughts about what you're doing to allow you to to free up your mind to have bigger and better thoughts than, should I get milk? So that's my kind of quick one. What it means to me is, I guess, similar, it is, I feel like we get caught up a lot when we talk about GTD into the, the process and the capture and the, capture, clarify, the archive. There is a whole methodology to it, and there really is. What is nice about it, and why actually the geeks in the world will really love it, is because it's very, very well defined. You read a lot of these books, and I've read way too many productivity books, and it's like, you should make your chakra feel good about your task list.
There is a system if you're really geeky, and one of the commenters on Twitter where we said we were going to do this podcast said, don't talk about the tools.
Right.
We're going to talk about the tools a little bit at the end, but there are tools. So if you're super geek and you're tech guy and you're this and you're that,
right,
you can follow a tool that, I mean, you still have to use your brain, but you can use those tools to...
You have to use your brain?
There are many tools that are built around the methodology of GTD.
There's a whole industry around GTD. But let me here's what I like to put to it. There's nobody I can think of on the planet who couldn't use some of what the methodology talks about. There is some things that are so simple, so easy, some concepts that are just like, they're like, oh, water is wet. And you go, oh, water is wet. And then there are things, then there's the next level of like ways to deal with how water is wet. And then there is, you become a water bender and you can bend water, right? So there's like these different levels.
And that gets to kind of the point of where, where you said at the beginning of this conversation where you'd have sleepless nights. That to me is a very good, not really definition of getting things done, but if you want to no longer have sleepless nights because there's so much stuff going on in your brain that you can't sleep, getting things done helps you, or has helped me. I've had those nights where you're like,
you're stressed.
You're stressed. There's so much work that you have to do, home and work and everything else in your environment, everywhere, that your brain won't stop. It just won't stop, and you can't relax enough to just sleep.
Right.
And getting things done is one of the tools and methods that you can use to, and a lot of what it talks about is getting things off your mind.
Right.
Until which point you need to put it on your mind.
So let me give you how I break it down for people if I'm just explaining it from the straight up.
Yeah, like if my little lady were to walk into the podcast studio, she doesn't know from GTD except for when I tweet that I'm doing my weekly review and I hashtag it GTD. And she's like, GTD, and like it was on The Office, I think Daryl was handing out GTD to everybody.
Yes,
and she's like, that's your thing. And I'm like, it's not my thing.
Well, it is your thing. I think you got to embrace it. Here's the thing. So, and I think some of the things that hit me when I read it was, if you were a farmer, and I'll put it in my own words, if you were a farmer back 100 years ago, and again, if we look about like what humans did 100, 200, 300 years ago, you had tasks during the day. You were a serf in medieval England, or you were a lord, or you're a pope.
Make a Game of Thrones reference somehow?
I haven't started this season, but whatever. And you had your things to do that day. You're a farmer. You wake up in the morning. You got to go. The sun wakes you up in the morning. Great. You go feed. You have to go do the cows, because the cows have to be done twice a day because they fill up. You do the cows, then after the cows, you got to do the thing. Then you fill out the amount of information that you have to keep in your head and you have to do and you have to keep sort of floating went from a very simple set, like maybe 10 things. And one thing you had to remember was, I got to remember to change Bessie's, thing. And you'd remember it because you got one thing in your head.
This podcast sponsored by the Farmers Association of America.
One of my uncle, or my cousin's a farmer, milk farmer. So I've actually lived on a farm and whatever. So that's something else you didn't know about me. So, but as information ages come, and as we now have gone from this, a world, and we've had knowledge workers, Peter Drucker named the knowledge worker in the 70s. Everything we do now is inundated with information and constant, and it comes from every single place. I mean, we talk about email. I've written tons of blog posts on it. Emails, tweets, things. So the amount of information, the amount of things you have to keep in your head, the amount of things that you have to remember, the amount of things that you have to deal with, the amount of tasks that you have to do, the amount of commitments you make on a daily basis. If you actually think of all the times you tell somebody, oh, I'll do that, or you send an email and say, yeah, I'll handle that.
Right.
It's in the hundreds.
And it's not going back. It's not
going one way. Right.
It's going one way.
And so here's the reality, kids. Your brain isn't meant to do that. And this is where I think one of the big aha moments was, your brain is very, very bad. This is been proven in science. Science has proven that your brain can only remember 8 things at a time or keep 8 things in your head at a time. And so what it does is if you try to give it more, it just constantly is juggling all these thoughts. And sometimes they're, oh, there's a helicopter out my window. And then it's, ooh, I got to get milk. And then it's like, oh, I got to order the pizza later. And then you just have these thoughts and they keep going. Your brain struggles trying to remember. So all GTD says is, listen, your brain no longer is good at doing that. What your brain is really good at doing is having deep thoughts about Jack Handy. Your brain's very good about doing, creative things. It's not good at remembering a list of things. It's just not. So get it out of your head. Put it somewhere that your brain, that has its own brain, goes, I'm okay with that.
And I trust that.
Right. So people say,
that was my big aha.
The trust
for
factor.
GTD was the trust was, when I was very similar story, like struggling with like sleepless kind of nights, and you and I talked about it, and you basically said, look, man, go back to these concepts and re-look at the situation. It was if I can just put these things that I'm thinking about into a place that I can trust and my brain can trust know that it's okay that I don't remember this thing now, because I will have trigger points to tell me to go look at it later and it'll be there, then I can sleep easy at night.
Well, then what happens is your brain, this is a truth, this is a fact, your brain then goes, okay, and it lets it go.
Right.
And instead of spinning it in a circle in your head, it goes, oh, good. I trust that you put it in a place that we're going to come back to within a reasonable amount of time, and then I'm going to look at it, and then I'll know that thing is there, and then I'm going to let it go. And I'll go to the other 10 things that I'm worried about or I'm thinking about, and then if you can get all of them out, so this is why capture is the big thing in GTD. Capture all the crap that's on your mind, put it in a place that you're going to go back to, organize in a way that makes it easier for you to deal with, and then make sure you go back to it at least weekly to go through all of your stuff. And I think this is where people fall off the.
Well, this is your.
I'm jumping ahead.
Well, you're jumping ahead.
Where do people fall off though?
You're giving me you're giving me the challenge of being the interviewer here, of letting you talk only so much.
Okay, I stopped.
Well, because we've talked about a number of different things, but you do mention the amount of information is just going in one way, and that we need to put things in a place that we trust and that our brains trust.
Yes.
And the book was written, I mean, it's pretty old by today's standards.
Yeah, I think it's 15 years old.
Right, and I mean, people are writing ebooks every day and throwing out more information. Right. So I know we've been asked by the Twitterverse to not spend too much time, but the book talks a lot about folders and lists and tickler files and someday maybe lists and reference materials, and really talks about like paper and folder. Yeah, it's like pre-email almost. The book.
No. It's the whole thing about email. But he did write it to be very evergreen. Like if you go back and read it, there are certain things that he talks about that are just they just stand out as like. Especially now, and honestly only in the last couple of years, one of the theories is that you put things into a series of what's called 43 folders, which is one folder for every month and then one folder for every day. And basically, if you want to say, you get a flyer for the Philharmonic. I'm using his examples, but you get a flyer for the Philharmonic that's coming in the spring, but you don't want to do anything about it until April, right? So you put it in your April folder. So then every month you go through and go, oh, it's April. Let me open my April folder and find out what's in there. And you find, the 3 things you left for yourself, and you go, oh, so that's called the 43 folders. It's actually a website, blah, blah, blah. And that seems archaic nowadays because, 43 folders, right, and to have an actual series of folders. I actually never did the folders, but the concept behind it is...
I saw you with folders. Oh, you did. You were doing something, I think, a little different with folders.
I've never done 43 folders. I've never actually done the folder. There's certain things about his folder system
you did something different with folders. But where I was going with this is what have you done to adapt to the modern times, and what are... you've made your pick of the week, OmniFocus. Why don't you spend a little, like, brief few moments here?
Can I re-ask the question?
Yeah, you can re-ask.
How do I interpret what he wrote 13, 15 years ago into modern day reality?
Yeah, so for those people out there who are saying, you know, I'm reading this Getting Things Done book, and this guy's talking about 43 folders in a file drawer.
Right.
And, like, I've just got email in my Outlook.
Right.
Or email in my Apple Mail or in my Gmail. And, you know, I've got task lists up the wazoo. I can't write them on a legal pad. What should I do?
I would think the one thing that I think the biggest thing that is in his book that I think is no longer applies is the separation of projects and their associated tasks. So in GTD, a project is anything that takes more than 2 steps and that's going to take you more than 2 minutes to do. So a project is not taking this can of soda over there to the recycling bin, but a project would be, you know, my yearly taxes or this podcast or mowing the lawn. These are projects. These are things that, you know, that you got to do a couple things and you got to do them in different spaces. So he talks a lot about projects and context. And a context is where you do things. So a context would be at phone. So that's where you make calls. And the idea behind it is if you organize your stuff into projects and contexts, that when you're at a phone, you can pull up the at calls list and look at it and go, here's the 7 calls I need to do. You don't need to think about what you need to do anymore. You can just power through it. It really is about separating out the planning of doing the work and the doing of work. And so if I can pull up a list of here's the things I need to do on the calls, or here's the one I need to do at the internet, or here's the ones I said I'm going to do at Google and I'm just going to search, I can go power through those 5 or 6 tasks and I can basically move those projects forward a little bit.
And I think one of the important things that you just said there, and you didn't gloss over it, but it went pretty quickly, was that it doesn't mean that the planning isn't important. Because the planning, to me, that was my big barrier to GTD, was like, man, I got to write all this stuff down.
So let me tell a story. Let me tell you one of the GTD moments of your story, and then I'll go back to how I see it translating. One of my favorite moments with you, I hope you don't embarrass you, is you said, I'm struggling with capturing the stuff what are projects and what means a project and what does that mean and where to capture it. Now, we had already decided OmniFocus, you're going to use OmniFocus, great. But you're like, I don't know what to put in there. I got these 3 things, but help me figure out everything. So I did something that I've done with you, and he actually tells you to do in the book, again, in a much older fashioned way, but I'll tell you how I did it with you, which is we were in your apartment, and I said, okay, let's sit here on the couch, and I'm going to point to things. And basically, in GTD, he says, listen, either it's a piece of art on your wall and it's not going anywhere, then leave it there. It's okay. But if you look at that stack of papers over in the corner, that your brain is going, oh, I should do something with that stack of papers, that's a project. That's where you should write that down because your brain is thinking about it. The art on the wall, it's not thinking about it unless you need to get it reframed. Then it should be a project. So what I did with you is I sat in your apartment and I literally went around and picked things up in the corner. Yep. And I found this thing of whatever clothes. And I said, what's this? You're like, oh, those are just clothes. I said, okay. Are they supposed to be here forever in the corner? I mean, you were single at the time, so it's like, well, I guess you still are single, but you weren't living with somebody. But I was like, are they supposed to live here forever? This is their final resting place on the planet, is in a bag in the corner? You're like, no, I'm going to give them I have to bring them downstairs. I said, can you do it in less than 2 minutes? You're like, no, it's a project. Oh, I went to the next thing. What about this picture sitting here? It's sitting on the thing. Oh, I was going to get that project. We just went around and I pointed to things and I said, start thinking about all that stuff that's been captured in your head and just write it down. Put it into some place that you're going to come back to. Again, we'll talk about weekly reviews. I thought you had a big aha moment. It's like, oh yeah, this is all the stuff that I didn't see now, but I almost can see how I can now look around the room, and maybe that's
like a Terminator 2 moment.
Yeah, it's like
you're looking around and you see things.
Yep.
So I had, for me personally, like 2 epiphany aha moments.
Oh, good.
And that was one of them, and the importance of the weekly review was another one.
That was another year later.
Well, it took me a while to really embrace the
we'll talk about
of it. We're going to talk about it.
But let me get to the translation.
Yeah, because so translate it into like today's, like what, because back then you'd have this project list and tasks.
And he literally talks about writing them on a piece of paper. So you'd have this list called projects. You have another list called at email and another one called at calls. That's where I think is one of the biggest misnomers now, is because now there's programs that you can connect the two And basically you can sort them which way you want. If I want to see all my tasks, I can just say, show me all calls, show me all projects, right? And so he was really talking about to put that in a paper form and keeping them separate. So you literally have a list of projects, you read down them and say, what's the next action of this project? And then you go write that down on the context paper. That's one of the big ones. In a modern day too, it's like, I think ubiquitous capture is the thing that I think everybody could use. This is the one that I've got my wife, who does not do GTD at all. It's the one I've gotten her to take two concepts. It's only been, almost 10 years. I've gotten her to take two concepts. And one is ubiquitous capture. That is the idea that when something pops on your mind, when you think, oh, I'm going to do that, just write it down. Go put it someplace. Go put it in a task list. Go put it somewhere. Write it down, because it's only going to be there for a second, and your mind will then kick it up in the wrong time. You'll be in the shower and you'll think about it again, and there won't be time to write down. So ubiquitous capture. And I would say in the modern day, you just need to have something that is constantly with you. For me, that's my phone. My phone is with me 24/7. And, and nowadays we have syncing and we have all sorts of great stuff that keep all our tasks together.
Let's tie this to the cloud, so it's a cloudy.
Sure.
So podcast.
Nowadays you don't have to keep anything in one space. You got Dropbox, you got Evernote, you have OmniFocus, you have Google Docs, right? You have Google Keep. You can write a task in one place and it can show up in another place. So the idea to ubiquitous capture is make sure you're writing it down. And then again, I would say pick a technology or something behind you where you can marry back the projects and their actions, the related actions. So to me, those are the two. The 43 folders ones, not so much, because there's still a good use for it. You could just put it on your file system, and search really makes 43 folders not as much. And the other one, I think that's a little antiquated. He talks about the one that I think he doesn't, that is still true to this day that you should absolutely do, is he talks about when you're doing reference material, which is stuff that I'm going to put this away, I'm never going to see it again, I just need to know that it's someplace. He gives three things. He's like, 1, manila folders. That is still the most true thing on the planet. Still true. 2, he says, get a label maker. Label makers make everything easy. I totally agree. Get a label maker. And 3, he says,
year.
And he says, name it by something and do it alphabetically. He says, just do it alphabetically. Don't do, mobile phone. He's like, just do it alphabetically, because your brain will go back and go.
That means put it in the file cabinet alphabetically. Right.
So menus are on M. You don't go, well, they're Chinese menus to go C. No, and just do it simple, alphabetical. That will always work. I added on to that year, so I always do alphabetical and then the year, because I find I'm going through and you basically want to quickly go and go, oh, what's 2009? Let me just put that, either further away or throw it away. You don't need it anymore. So
right.
That's my long-winded answer.
Thank you. So, we've talked a lot about, the concepts, and I think so far we've kept it kind of generic, not so much work, not so much home. Maybe a little bit more geared towards the work environment than the home environment. And that's where you were kind of inspired by it, was at work. Why don't we talk about it outside of the work environment and how you can use GTD? Because I think a lot of people think of it as, I'm a project manager. And that's what I do. I manage projects. And a lot of people who listen to this podcast, I'm guessing, are project managers in some way, shape, or form. Most people are.
You're all knowledge workers.
Knowledge workers, right? And you think about using getting things done, or GTD, to do your job better, faster, and just be more efficient. And maybe instead of having to be at the office till 7, you get to leave at 5, or whatever it may be. Why don't you talk about using it in every aspect of life? So how it helps you both connect your home environment with your work environment, and how it makes that easier for you.
Sure. So I first say that I'm in a little bit unique situation, and I made this switch about 5 years ago, where I decided to break down the walls between work and home, and I think it's always been better for me since doing that. I had a technological gap when I worked at that big company. They wouldn't allow me to keep the software because they were in a Mac shop, the software I was using. So I actually had a work GTD system and a home GTD system.
You sort of rigged Outlook.
Yes.
And there was a pamphlet.
There's a pamphlet
on how to how to use Outlook as your GTD tool.
And I literally rigged Outlook to do that. And that way, it did increase the amount of work in terms of GTD, which is that I had 2-week reviews and stuff like that. But I kept a work GTD system and a home GTD system. I would say now I've bridged that gap, because if you think about GTD being your second brain and being the place you put the stuff that you don't want your brain, you really only have one. You want to have one other brain. I don't want to have to collect a bunch of brains. So, and now again, with all the technology, again, I didn't have an iPad back then. I didn't have an iPhone back then.
Right.
So nowadays I would break the barrier anyway. Even though they didn't allow me to use my software, I would still break it. Yeah, I'd break it. But I in my task, in my what I keep in my GTD system, I would say 70% of it's not work, right? Because in fact, while my work stuff is complicated, it is probably the best documented, the best organized, and has the most sort of easy to understand what the next thing is to do, because it's work, and work is sort of organized that way. You have a meeting, you have a calendar event, you have this, you have that. It's very organized. Home is actually tougher because it's not as organized. So it's easy to look at a project and call it a project, right? Oh, it's a project to launch a new Salesforce implementation for ABC company. Oh, it's a project. Yeah, no duh. What's hard is to look at your life and say, was that a project? Like, something broke. A shelf broke in my closet the other day from too much weight on it. That's a project. I got to fix that shelf. It's not going to fix itself. It's not going to go away. It's going to take more than 2 minutes, and it's going to take more than one action. I can't just fix it. I got to go open it up. I got to empty it out. So there's a bunch of stuff I got to do, and I got to sort of keep it on my radar, because I got to fix it at some point. There's a project. And then there's all sorts of projects that are just always happening and always, kind of coming up. That'd be great if they kind of reminded you before they came up. So I know you and I both, I think we joked once, February 1st, when I posted, I'm like, oh, I love it because my GTD system, OmniFocus, just because my Valentine's Day project just popped open. It's a project that's set to repeat every year, and basically pops up on February 1st and says, hey, Valentine's Day is start to do the things you need to do. Go buy the car, do whatever. So part of it is like, even to that level, taking that off my mind. I don't look at my calendar and go, oh, Valentine's Day. You know why? I go, I know that my system will tell me, and it will handle it.
Yep, I've done we were joking because you said it. I think you put it in Chatter or something, and I
oh god,
said,
crossing the streams, Chatter, GTD.
And I think I said mine did too. Like, it was set for like the same day, and my anniversary does the same thing, and my oil changes do the same thing. Like, all those kind of repetitive things that you don't really, you don't even think about, like oil change. That's something that I have to remember to do, or registration, or any of that stuff. Like, I have to remember my oil is not changing itself. I have to bring it somewhere on a time basis.
So this is what I think. I'll give some GTD ninja stuff now, because this is where the people who start GTD struggle. Is they start off on, I got to capture all my stuff in my life, and then they go too far. Mm-hmm. And then they go down to, if I got to capture my thing, then I have to capture this. I've had people come to me say, I have a project, and what I sometimes do is I'll go review their projects with them and see what's going on. And one I saw clipped nails. Yeah. So literally had someone on their it was actually their cat's nails, fine, whatever. But it was like clipped nails, and I remember thinking, I said, you don't really need to do that. And I said, because here's the things you don't need to put in GTD. The things that will automatically tell you when they need to happen.
Like going to the bathroom.
Going to the bathroom, good example. It's very
showering.
Empty the dishwasher.
Right.
Don't need to know, because it's gonna fill up, and then it's gonna empty, and then it's gonna taking out the dog. You know why? Because the dog will let you know when it needs to go out.
Right.
Like, there's certain things. Maybe there's things you want to have a little bit more time to make sure you do it before it gets too bad. Like, you don't want to look out and see your lawn is like 6 feet high. Then maybe you want to mow that. I have one for watering my plants. Why? Because it's an irregular schedule. I would forget about. I wouldn't know when to do it if I did it last time. I don't want to keep track of so I have it set every 10 days, repeat after I've done it. And that's great. Every 10 days, pops up, go water my plants. And I go water my plants. And
one of the things I struggled with earlier on, and still sometimes struggle with now, is not the capturing, like the things like clip my nails, but capturing too many tasks within the project at one time. And I've found, for me, just capturing the next action or maybe the next 2 actions are good enough. I don't need to make this into a Microsoft project plan.
That's a good point.
I just need to know the next thing that I need to do, and then my brain will let me know what the next thing is that I need to do until the project is complete.
So for all of you who are struggling and probably already turned it off and said, you know what, this sounds like too much. Why would I have projects for everything? You need to reevaluate what a project means. It's because there's really no other good way of saying it. But take away project as the big project, rolling out software, CRM, whatever. And
look, projects are everything. My first job was at KB Toys, and I had projects, and my projects were open the inventory that we just got and put them on the shelves.
Right.
That was called a project. That's life.
But if you move your shift from that, because again, we're probably talking to a group that probably looks at projects as projects.
Well, now we're talking to like 6 people.
Now 6 people, but they're all very productive. So I say one of the things when you read it. So that's a good example. That's when you read it, it's hard because I think even projects, the idea of a project has changed over the last 15 years. It has a meaning, and you have to kind of lose yourself in the meaning. Just like tasks have a meaning. Sometimes it's not about that. When he's talking about projects, he's just talking about things that need to get done that are going to take more effort than can be captured on, that can be done. Again, some other rules that he talks about, big ones are the 2-minute rule. So you go through your list of things that you need to do, or you usually pick things up. And this is one of the other ones I've taught my wife, which is that if it's going to take less than 2 minutes, just do it. Don't think about it. Don't write it down. If you look at the glass and the glass is over there, needs to go to the kitchen, don't think to yourself, oh, I should go put that. No, you should be up on your feet and go put it over there in the kitchen. Don't even think about it. Just do it. And then, because that'll clear away so much. 50% of all the stuff that's in your head is stuff you're just visually looking at going, oh, that's not in the right place. Just do it.
Right.
And then leave the other stuff, the stuff that you're not going to do, put those on put those as projects or task lists or whatever. And then you know that you're going to come back to it. And you know it'll be handled, and your brain then frees up, literally frees up, and goes, okay, now I can have big thoughts. And I think I want to put that out there as one of the big things of GTD was like, why would I do this? Why would I spend all this time? Because eventually you want your brain to do the things that's really good at, which is having big thoughts, inquisitive stuff, thinking deeper. I've had some of the best ideas I've ever had once I've kind of cleared my mind of all the stuff that should be off of it.
Right.
Literally the greatest ideas.
Mind
like water. There you go.
So I'm going to ask, we haven't talked about one very, we
the elephant in the room?
The elephant in the room. And I'm feeling like it's going to be the answer to this question, which will allow you to then go for it. Because to
2 hours later.
So to me, there's two single most important concepts, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of silly to say, but there's 2 to me.
The most important thing is these 2 things.
Right.
Okay.
So in your mind, what is the single most important concept of the methodology? And, really, in other words, if you only did one thing from GTD and only one thing, what would you do?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the thing you're thinking.
Okay, so I'll touch on that thing then.
Well, I mean, it is, because I think that's where you get black belt. Black belt's when you do that thing.
Right.
The one thing you're going to do, capture.
Ubiquitous capture. That was the other thing. So, okay.
If you were going to say, if my daughter, who's 7, said, GTD, what I need to do, I'd say, write down the things that come on your mind, right? Because I know that I can get her to do the other stuff later. Like, I can build on that one. But, capturing is the most important, because there's nothing else works unless capture goes on.
The weekly review, which is the other kind of big elephant in the room that we haven't talked
about.
Well,
tell me what is a weekly review?
All right. So now you're putting me on the spot. So to me, and how
not to you, what is it?
Well, I think it's different to everybody.
No,
I do.
Just give me the big concept. It's a concept.
Well, it is a time set aside where quiet time, right? Alone time.
He's feeling a little pressured now that I've asked him.
Yeah. Alone time where you sit down and go through all of the things that you have collected for the last week, if not 2, and are sitting in your quote-unquote inbox, right? The concept of the inbox, which we haven't even mentioned, is like a big concept in GTD, where it's, in his vernacular, it was a bin on your desk with papers, which still exists today, but now we have all sorts of inboxes. We have your email inbox, you have your inbox, which is in your in your GTD system, right? Things that you've just captured.
But the physical one still exists.
Physical one still exists.
I still use it just
you
the way.
Still get mail in the mail, and you still get papers.
You don't have a physical one. You have the mobile one.
I do. It's sitting over there.
Okay.
You just don't see. It's not a physical bin. It's just a corner of the desk where things go.
Okay.
I also have a mobile folder that is
branded GTD, I think.
Yeah, that is just pieces of paper. So the weekly review to me is about collection. Mm-hmm. You know, you collect all those things that you've been capturing over the week that haven't already been filed away. Mm-hmm. So going back, you know, refreshing yourself. Okay, here's all these things that I've collected and need to do. Now let me put them in their appropriate place. Let me file them away. Let me put them in the project. Let me create a project for this. Can I do this? It's not weekly review time. Should I do it? I can do it in 3 seconds. I'm going to do it. I know that's sort of like anti-weekly review, but to me, if there's something that's in the weekly that I captured and then got and then saw and was like, you know, at the time it wasn't the right time or place to do that thing, but I knew I needed to do it, and I'm sitting there in my weekly review and I can do it in about 30 seconds, I'm going to do it. So to me, the weekly review is, again, about collecting all those things that you've captured in all the different places, organizing them, putting them into those projects and places that you can trust, looking back over some of the places that you wouldn't necessarily think are like capture places, like your calendar, right? Going back a couple weeks in your calendar and saying, what have I done over the last 2 weeks? And maybe teasing out some things from there. Ooh, there's something that I missed, right? Capturing all those things that you've missed, looking ahead 2 weeks and saying, okay, there's something I need to be ready for. Here's something I need to be ready for. It's going to come in the next 2 weeks. Do I have a plan for that? And it's really not, to me, so much about doing. It's more about reviewing, and hence the name Weekly Review. Reviewing everything that I've said that I've captured and have to do, and making sure that it's in those trusted places.
If I were going to make a big statement that would probably scare everybody off this call right now, I'd say it's reviewing your life.
It's not a call.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, I don't know why I said call.
It's a conference call. Hey, everybody. We'll take you off hold in a minute.
If I were going to scare everybody off, I would say it's reviewing your life once a week. It's really going back and saying, okay, what have I done? What commitments have I made? What projects do I have on my plate? What things that have come in that I wasn't able to file or folder or think about? And now is the time to not do, but actually to go through and to make sure they go into the right place. What's nice about the weekly review is it's the most, as Dave Allen, again, this is why a lot of people like this system, is that it's very well documented what to do, right? There's literally papers and things, and you can download exactly what to do. And if you just did that, you'd be golden. Like, I think all of us tweak it and start to build in other things because our inboxes are in different places, you know, emails in inbox, whatever. Google Docs is an inbox for me at this point. So like lots and lots of inboxes. Yeah. So one of my things is to go to my many inboxes to make sure that I've kind of gotten the stuff that I need to get out of them.
Doesn't he call it like an in basket?
In basket, yeah. Like he doesn't call it inbox.
The word, I don't know if the word inbox existed.
I think it did because he flips back and forth. But anyway, so yeah, I mean that it's funny because it's not even the third though. It's not even the second thing I would say that you have to do if you're going to start GTD.
Really, because to me the most impactful.
It's the best, but it's not the thing I would say.
The most impactful items from the methodology for me have been ubiquitous capture in all sorts of forms, whether that be in email, a flagging system. So, you know, knowing to flag emails and flagging them in different colors maybe, and then during the weekly review, reminding myself that I need to go back and look at those flagged emails that are in a specific color and they mean certain things or whatever works for you, right? So to me, that collection and then review of the collected items. And I know it sounds a lot like, well, hey guys, you're just collecting stuff and then reviewing it. You're not actually doing things, but you'd be surprised that if you do, you'll have so much more time. And this was my hurdle in the beginning was, it kind of sounds like all I'm doing is doing this thing. I'm not doing the work. I'm doing this getting things done thing so that I can do work, but I'm spending a lot of time doing the getting things done stuff. Like I'm collecting all this stuff and and I'm reviewing it, but I'm never doing it. Like you'll come to find that goes away. That overwhelming feeling goes away.
And that's when you know you've hit another level too. Is that I think there's a couple things. So here's my maybe this is a blog post. How do you know you're a ninja? You're a black belt. One is 8 days go by and you haven't done a weekly review. You feel it. You literally feel it and go, I need to get this. Like I need to have a weekly review. Two, other than that and capturing stuff, GTD is really out of your way. You don't think about it. You just do it. These things are so ingrained that they're just part of your everyday existence. That's why for those things, I don't really again, they move out of your system. A lot of the start of the GTD is a lot about the tools and the stuff and the technology and this tool or that. You get to the point where that becomes absolutely not part of it at all. And it gets out of your way. In fact, you're a GTD master when you don't need or use your tool very often. You need it when you need it, but you don't, kind of live in it. So people ask me because they're like, well, do you capture everything? And they asked about our real project work at work.
Right.
How much of those stuff in our real project? Very little. Very little actually goes into my GTD system because, as I know, it's captured in a place that I already know I trust. And I know I'm going to go back to.
I'm exactly the same way. I know my weekly review will get me back to that stuff.
Right. So if I throw things in there, I know I will get back to it. I don't need to put it in it. If I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, this might make it through a crack, then I'm like, okay, go throw it into GTD. Maybe it's even a backup. Go throw it into OmniFocus, and you can come back to it. But I say the other one is, ubiquitous capture is massive. I really think for everyday existence, for people who aren't going to do weekly reviewing and do this crap, calendar. Understanding and treating your calendar like it should be treated, like that a calendar is a hard landscape.
So understanding, before you go into this, everybody uses their calendar different.
But they're all using it wrong.
Not true. But I'll walk into, and this comes up a lot with Salesforce implementations when you talk to people about their Outlook integration.
Yeah.
And then they start talking about their calendar.
Right.
And then they start talking about well, I don't want that task to go in as a calendar. I want it to go in as a task. And it's
they'll say, I don't want that calendar event to show up. And you say, well, what is it? It says, well, I gotta call Bob, and I put it on Monday, so I'm going to call Bob on Monday. I'm like, well, that's not a calendar event. You put it on Monday.
Well, that example almost is. There's different examples of where tasky things go into calendars, get back to boss about this, right? And you put it on Tuesday at 2:00.
Right.
Well, it's not really a meeting. You're more blocking off time to do something, which is a different thing. And
treating your calendar as a hard landscape, because it's one of the things that people are very, very clear about is that if it's on my calendar, I need to go and do it. Right. And so this is where I think if you took that same thought that you have about your calendar, which if it's on my calendar, I need to do it. And you said, and do you ever not use your calendar? Do you ever just for 2 weeks try to remember every event that you're supposed to be at for 2 weeks? Ever done that? Not use your calendar. Don't even look at your calendar.
I could not do that.
Well, then why are you trying to remember tasks?
Yeah.
So that's where I'd say for the people who are kind of well, why do I need it? It's the exact same thing as your calendar. It's just saying for all the things that are not on your calendar, for all those tasks, for all those things that you've said you're going to do, how about you, you take those and you put them in another system that's the same as your calendar and treat it the same way. Treat your calendar like a hard landscape. If it's on your calendar, you got to do it. You got to go to the doctor. You go to the doctor.
And I feel like a lot of people don't use calendars for their personal life. Eye-opening. Aha.
Really?
No, I really do. I feel like there are a lot of people out there who, when they're at work, it's like they live in their Outlook, right? You live in Outlook at work. Well, that says something about what you're doing if you're living in Outlook, and I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody. But if it's on my calendar, I go to the meeting, right?
Right.
And some people's goals is just fill up my day with calendar events.
Right.
I want to just be in a meeting all day, 6 meetings back to back to back to back.
That's not good.
Right? And, well, that's my day, right? And someone's trying to squeeze in a half hour with me, right? And then you'd be surprised how many of those same people who live and die by that Outlook blue, purple, light blue, empty space in that calendar don't do it at home.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you think that that works for you at work, maybe you don't, and that's why you don't do it at home. Why would you not have a home calendar? And maybe even more than one home calendar. Like your home calendar, your shared home calendar, your birthday calendar, like all sorts of calendars, just to, you know, since adopting like calendars, that's a big thing, and really and you wrote a blog post about it, and you can go read it at blog.arkus.com.
There you go.
You wrote
family calendar.
The family calendar blog post, which I thought was, you know, when you told me that I could do that with the iCal and iCloud, or maybe it was even MobileMe at the time, I was like, ooh, I gotta get that going, because that's the money right there. I mean,
that's not even, well, that, I mean, it's part of his GTD, but I think it's really helpful for people who are struggling with why. Again, if you say to people, they say, well, why should I do GTD? You say, well, do you have a calendar? And they say yes. And you say, do you look at your calendar? And they say yes. And you say, well, why do you put things on your calendar? Why don't you just remember when to go? And they're like, well, because I'll forget, and I put things on my calendar and I review it to make sure that things are on it, and I go to those things because I made the commitment to do it. And if I didn't look at it, I'd be in trouble. I'd be like, yeah, that's my life with GTD.
Yep.
Same thing, except for I only put certain things that have a start and end date and whatever on my calendar. I put everything else in this other system, and those are the two. That's it. Those two things are my brains. Throw in Evernote, but whatever. And that's where I live. That's what tells me what I need to do when I'm not doing the other stuff. I can wake up in the morning and not look at my OmniFocus for 3 hours because I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, and I go and do work. And that's, again, where you get the power is where you don't need it because you've already pre-decided all the things you're going to do in that week review, and you've planned it out. Then you just go do work, go do things, and do a lot of it, and do it. And then when you take your head up and you're like, oh, well, what now I've forgotten where I need to be. It's not on my calendar. I have an hour. Look at OmniFocus. Oh, I can do those 3 things. Boom, boom, boom. Let me get them done. And that's when you actually get into the getting things done. It's like when you can use it to augment your what you're doing, and you power through stuff, and you realize that stuff that is long-term stuff, the stuff that's hard to do, the things that take lots of planning, but you realize you have it in a system that you've come back to every week, and that you've planned out the next action, and you've completed those actions, and you realize, oh, I'm going on that vacation because I had it in my calendar. I had it in my GTD for 6 months, and I've been doing the little pieces, adding the little pieces up to make the whole. Go ahead. You can keep interviewing.
No, I really only have a few more questions.
Okay.
They're short ones because I think we're kind of wrapping it up. I just wanted to know personally, how many people have you tutored or turned on to GTD?
I don't know. It's not a ton. I mean, it's like it's maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 people total.
It's more than like most people in the universe.
Yeah.
Like most people haven't done.
I would say
most people don't know what GTD is.
That's true. And again, I don't think that it's not, and I wouldn't even say it's for everybody, but I think everybody could use pieces of it, because there is something kind of, if you get into the tasking and all that, there is something pretty like binary about it, which is really good for some personalities. Other personalities, I'm not sure the binariness of it would be so good. So again, there are reasons I would think, I've been trying to get my wife to be a GTD person. I have shown her many examples. At this point I've gotten ubiquitous capture and reviewing her calendar, and that's it in 10 years.
That's pretty good. So aside from the book, and the book that we've been talking about is
By the way, are you going to ask me the questions that he asked in the thing? Because he asked a bunch of questions.
He did?
Yes. I just want to make sure you get those.
No, I wasn't going to even bother.
The guy who actually told us how to do this?
Well, I thought that I kind of like got to them.
Just make sure you cover them.
I thought I covered them in what we were kind of talking about, but
okay.
Right. I'll read through those while you give me this list. So aside from the book, and the book being Getting Things Done by David Allen, what else should I be doing? What else should I be reading, listening to, watching? Like, I know there's a litany of material out there.
So it's hard because I've now been doing, actually I'm going to write a blog post next year, which actually I replied to Scott and I said, I said I was thinking about doing this next year because I was going to do a blog post called 10 Years on GTD, because next year will be my 10th year of actually doing it. Again, I pulled up the Amazon when I purchased it in 2004. So I've been doing, I have so much material is out there. There's a couple things I would do nowadays. Like, the book is good, but it does have, I think you have to kind of be interested to read it. Just don't give it to yourself if you're not interested. One of the places I would actually start today, if I were going to just start, there's a TED video that David Allen did at TED that I think this, a year ago, you just Google it, it's on YouTube, that he does like a 22-minute presentation, and he barely even talks about GTD. He just sort of lays it out in a scenario, in a story, and I would do that first, because that is so...
If it whets your appetite.
Yeah, and if you think that and you think, I want to learn more, then go read the book. Then I think there's a bunch of his... I actually love listening to his audio stuff. Not his book audio stuff, but his written audio stuff. And so the next place I would go is on said 43 Folders, 43folders.com, made and loved by a man named Merlin Mann, who we've probably talked about on this podcast before, who I guess is also a disciple. He did an interview series with David Allen, six podcasts. So if you're a podcast listener, you listen to podcasts, so you can go find this. He built it into one. It's about an hour and 45 minutes where he interviews David Allen. And it was more recent than not. So it's a lot of this, like, how do you deal with more not modern stuff? It is golden. You got to listen to it, because it really, it's a really great way of thinking about it.
Merlin's great to listen to.
Merlin's great.
David Allen's great to listen to when he's more
engaged,
off the cuff,
right?
And doing presentation type things.
Right.
Then his books are a little drier on
his
on
audiobooks
audio.
Are horrible. Sorry, not horrible, but they're bad.
They're a little. His
dry.
Personality doesn't come through.
Yeah.
So
you listen to his. If you can find and get his his audio series where he does seminars and the recorded seminars, those are really the best. And there are two of them that I know of. One you can get through him on his thing and download audio versions of, and one you can't even get anymore. And I bought for some extraordinary amount of money. But
like a collector's edition,
like a collector. Well,
there's
no,
also that weekly review.
He has a bunch
thing.
of those, but I think those are like when you're getting serious, like you want to have more and more and more. And then, again, we actually write a ton. I mean, I don't want to push our stuff, but go to blog.arkusinc.com and type in GTD. We've posted a bunch. I've posted stuff on Weekly Review. We posted about Inbox Zero. We posted stuff on things like that. There's no real good blog. There's no real good like podcast. I mean, there are some that are productivity, but he has his own podcast, so you can go back and listen to his stuff. So there's definitely some better ones in there. And then I say the pinnacle for me is really his Making It All Work, which is the book he wrote 15 years after GTD that is basically GTD again, but is much more theoretical, is much more, I don't know, it's just like flushed out. And I love listening to that. I've listened to that about 6 times. That's like my new GTD. Like, GTD is good, but Making It All Work, once you kind of get it, it's like it just fills in a lot of the gaps, a lot of the stuff. That's a great resource.
So now you've made me go back and look at Scott's list. I think we've talked about pretty much everything on his list, because I mean, it did help me shape what we were going to talk about. We talked about, you come into work, how do you get started on stuff? We kind of touched on that, right?
I think the overall, when I read his stuff, I think he really wanted to know more about the ins and outs, the details. And so, let me give because he asked, how do you actually use it? Because we've been talking a lot of theoretical.
Well, here's 2 questions to answer, from him that I think will help, right? So one is, do you organize the week? Mondays for X, Tuesdays for Y, Z happens daily, etc.
Yep.
And the second question is sort of a tack on to that is, something new comes in to throw you off. What do you do with it?
I think that's beautiful about GTD, is that since everything's captured in this thing and I know what I should be doing and not doing, when something new comes in, I'm never thrown off. I either say, I'm going to take this now, and there's one, I think he talks about this in one of his great books, or one of his things. He talks about this guy who had these folders, and in every folder he had what he was working on. So like a manila folder. So he would go in and he'd open up the folder and start working on the thing. And then if someone came in and bugged him, or, whatever, he'd just close the folder, put it to the side, deal with the person, and then when they came back, or, when they left and he dealt with them, he'd then open the folder up and continue working. So how do I deal with it? Do I plan out my week? I do. I actually do I plan out my week, and he's talking more of like how to stay productive. Definitely my calendar is a big one. My calendar is a big one for planning out my week. We've talked about, and I actually just posted, or I guess next week I'll be posting a blog post about how we use scrums. So we kind of use scrums as a way of planning out the big rocks of life, the big rocks in the week. There's actually a great PDF called Zen to Done that kind of taking a modern take on getting things done a little bit. And he talks about big rocks and pebbles. And like you should plan out your big rocks for the week and then put in all the pebbles. So like if you're filling you put the big rocks in, then you let the pebbles go around it. So I definitely do that. I look at my week and I go, okay, what's the big things I need to get done? What are the chunky big things? I need to get this big piece of data movement done. I need to get this 3 kickoffs done. And I put those things out. I schedule them, or I'll block the time on my week. And then I'll say, okay, now let's put in the pebbles. I can do these other things that are sort of pebble stuff that can go in. So again, I'm at the point where I don't really think about GTD anymore. It's just so much part of my life. So great. I hope that answers a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, my last question was, did I miss anything? Is there something that we haven't touched on that the people that are still listening, an hour or so in, need to know? I think we've obviously we've brushed the surface. You can tell that there's a lot of content out there and a lot of momentum around this methodology and this.
I think that's the thing.
Call it like a movement almost.
Don't take it so seriously.
Yeah.
I'd say like it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to go from paralyzed by procrastination to absolute
productivity
joy,
guru.
No, but I think there's so much in there that you can learn from and that you can take and that can make your life better. Anybody's life better. And again, unless you live in some place where you just have you don't have information overload, where you don't have too much stuff, you don't have too much commitments. I'd say the last thing is I like what GTD has done for me on the big scale, where I now look at my life, and this is where I think on a whole nother level, I now look at my life and what I do as being valuable. And I now look at what I make commitments to as being important. So like, is it important enough to put into OmniFocus? If it's important enough to put in OmniFocus, then I'm making a commitment to do it. And I feel like a lot of people in life make commitments to do stuff all the time. And you know who these people are. You ask them if you could borrow a book, and they say, sure, I'm going to leave that down. I'll let you borrow it. And then 6 months go by, and you remember, didn't I ask that guy that I was going to borrow a book? I would think one thing you know about me, and maybe it drives you crazy as well, is that if I make a commitment to you to do something, and this is where GTD has really changed my life, I don't forget it because I use the system. And if I say I'm going to get you that book, you'll turn around a day later and the book will be in your hand and I'll have given it to you, or it'll have come in from work. Because there's the slippage has become so small, and it makes it nice. It makes your life nice. It makes it tough to deal with people who haven't sort of done it because there's a lot of slippage, and you're like, you start to then, in a work environment, you sometimes track what they're not doing. So like, depending on who I'm working with, I might track that someone owes me something. So you say to me, it wouldn't be you, but someone else would say, I'll get you that document on Monday. So I write in GTD or in OmniFocus, I write, waiting for document from Sally, due Monday. And then Monday thing pops up in my head, says, oh, look, it's due. I ping them with an email. They're like, oh yeah, I'll get that over to you. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I wish you had written it down like I did. So in some ways, it's like a great responsibility because you become very good at being productive. You become very good at your tasks. You become very good at not forgetting stuff. And then you start to think, well, why is everybody else forgetful? And why is everybody else not remember this stuff? And why do I have to ask people to do stuff anymore? So that's a whole nother level. And again, really the commitment, when you start to think about your life and what you've committed to in your life, and you know what sort of is everything in your life, it makes it easier to either take on new stuff or to give up old stuff. And I wrote a blog post about quit 5 things, and that's really the key. Is like, you can go, I can give this up in my life. I know it's not important, or I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to put it on that I'm going to look at in a year from now list. And that frees up so much of your inner stuff that you think, oh, I got to do this, I got to do this. You go, nope, it's okay. I'll talk about that in a year.
Right.
I said I was going to have a house in Miami. It's a project sitting in OmniFocus that's on hold. I review it every 6 months. I look at it, I go, yeah, someday I want to have a house in Miami or a condo in Miami. And then I move on. And it doesn't plague me, it doesn't whatever me. It's out of my mind, and I get to review it, and I know I'm going to come back to it. So I want to ask you a question.
Oh.
Yeah. So
the table has turned.
We're running long here.
We're really running. How long are we at
We
this
are
point?
at an hour and 10 minutes.
This might be the longest
It could be.
CloudFocus Weekly ever.
So
Does this mean we don't have to do one next week?
yeah, maybe.
Or 2 weeks from now?
2 weeks
I
from
don't
now,
think
maybe
we'll
not.
be doing one.
So for you,
For me.
I'll ask you the same question. So
Okay.
what's the big takeaway? Your big takeaway that if you were going to, again, you're newer to GTD. You did what I did. You stopped and started a couple times. I think maybe on the third try, you kind of, went full boat, and you're now pretty full boat. You're a weekly reviewer. You're a, I would say, are you someone who, if you don't do your weekly review, you kind of like, it feels like you haven't brushed your teeth?
It doesn't feel like I haven't brushed my teeth, but I know it that next week. I feel it. I know, like, I typically do my weekly reviews on the weekend, usually on Saturday morning or Sunday morning, usually Saturday mornings. And I will know by Wednesday of the next week that I did not do my weekly review that week if I didn't do it. And I'll be like, really should have done that weekly review.
One thing he talks about that I just love as a great, he doesn't talk like mine like water.
That was the big question?
No.
That was it?
No, wait.
Okay.
I'll come back to it. Which was, he talks about when's the time you feel the most relaxed? And he says, and the answer is, well, right before a vacation. Why is it that the day before you head on a vacation, you feel the most relaxed about everything, and you're like, I'm just ready to go on vacation? It's because for the 2 weeks leading up to the vacation, you've gone through, you've reorganized, you've looked at all your projects, you've answered people, you've delegated, you've done what we call a weekly review. You've cleared the deck. And you feel good. Well, that feeling you can have every single week. Literally every single week you can have that, I feel good. I feel like I'm in control of my world. And it's a weird thing to say, but it's so true. I haven't met anybody who's gone through and actually done a good week review who doesn't go, I feel much better about everything.
I know I've said to you on like a Monday morning, like we'll be walking to the subway, I'll be like, I had a great weekly review this week. Or you'll even know when I have a really good one, because you'll have gotten pinged like
post and chatter.
You'll have gotten pinged like for a few things, like here's this, here's that, here's this, and you'll even write like someone's got a good weekly review going this week.
It's like having a good BM sometimes. So what would your advice to be as someone who's come, I'm so in it sometimes it's hard for me to see it, but like what would be your advice to someone who's either fallen off the wagon once or twice and wants to get back on? Like, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them other than talk to me, which is not practical?
That would have been my first thing. And the second thing is you listen to this podcast. But aside from that, I personally did a lot better with the audio materials and the short ones. So I would say to anybody who has who's stopped and started, so not somebody fresh, right? So someone who's like actually done GTD a little bit and understands the concept and maybe has read the book already and then decided to stop. That's who we're talking about?
Right.
Okay. So
or maybe like dabbled, but then wants to like get back in.
I would not say read the book. That's not what I would say to do.
Interesting.
Okay. What I would say is find these audio series that you've referenced and the videos, and for me the I can't remember the name of it, but it was like the GTD audio series. It was like 8 CD. It was like 8 hours, something like that. So I know that sounds crazy, but I think that's what really got me. Is because the content is very dry when you're just reading it or listening to someone read it.
Right.
But when someone is really passionate about something, and David Allen is passionate about productivity, and they are presenting it to a live audience, and then you get to listen to that, it is much more engaging. And you will get a lot more out of it, I think, than just reading the book or listening to the book.
Yeah, and I agree. The book really, as I look back at all the materials, the book feels more and more like a manual than
it is kind of like a manual.
It is, and for me, that's when I read it. That was what's nice about it.
Actually, you know what? Let me stop for just 1 second.
No. Capture.
Read the first chapter of the book.
The first chapter.
Yeah,
just
like
the
where
theory.
Get that, because that, I will say, that was another big like stop point for me. Was like, it's like, all right, let me pick the book back up. And then I read the first chapter and said, I don't need to read the rest of the book. I don't. Like, I read the book. Right. I don't need to reread the whole book.
Right.
I needed that first chapter to be like, yeah, mind like water.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's how it felt. That, like, back into the flow. Then go to the audio stuff. For me, the big one was that weekly review one. That was
the weekly review
David
audio
Allen,
series. Yep.
David Allen with 2 female hosts. Can't remember who either of them were,
both
but they were both like GTD nuts. And that was what like really stressed like the importance of an excellent weekly review. It was like, wow, listen to these people talk for 3 hours about the ins and outs and the nuances of a weekly review. Yeah, it's important.
And it's really
when
stories
you do it right,
and stuff.
Yeah, and they tell stories, and they're coaches. So they're like, I had this one client who had a really big problem at work, and everyone's calling them, and they got 1,000 emails, and they can't do anything, and then we talked about it, and then we talked about the weekly review, and he would shut his door and lock the door for 2 hours and say, nobody can call me or disrupt me or do anything during these 2 hours, and got his whole world back together in 2 hours. And the whole thing was straight, right? So to me, I would say first chapter of the book and then some of the audio stuff, particularly the weekly review.
So that's the warning I'd give about the book, is that it is a very much like a manual. And for me, when I had the aha moment, what I liked about it was the manual, was that it made the things to kill my procrastination check likable things. I went and ordered a label maker. I went and did this. I went and I think even at one point, he talks about really, in that first time, he even says in the book, to properly do GTD, to start GTD, he says, you need to take 3 days. He literally says you should set aside a weekend. If I do, and he tells it in a nice story, but he's like, if I do it with a client, I'll go in and we'll set aside an entire weekend where I'll come in on Saturday morning and we'll go for 2 days straight to get him started on GTD. That's very, very hard to take for anybody who's like picking up a book on productivity. It's like, you mean I got to take 3 days to get into GTD? Like straight work? Yeah, and then you throw it away. So I'd say, if you don't, you could probably do that and be up and running in 3 days and full boat and doing really great. And then or you can ease yourself in. And that's where I think the hardest part of his first book was it doesn't allow you to ease in. It's very much like you either just went through your entire house, picked everything up, asked yourself a question about it, and then threw it into an in basket, or you didn't. And for me, to help me, that was really great because it made it very, very actionable. But I can see how for others who are not struggling, like I feel like I had a disease, like they're like, oh, well, why would I do that? But you can still, if you read the whole book and then started to take the elements of it. So I would say, I agree. Start with the other things. Again, that TED Talk is really great at just setting a really open, high level. Start with the TED Talk, and then I'd say go for some of the audiobooks, some of the audio series. Again, the interview with Marilyn Mann, 43 Folders, a great interview. It really lays stuff out. And there are a ton of podcasts, out there. I'd say one of the ones that actually Scott said to mention, or someone else said to mention, don't forget to mention the Back to Work series where Marilyn Mann talks about GTD for about 3 series.
Yeah, for me, that was hard to get through.
The only reason I would say not to is because it's so buried. It's sort of his thing, but he buries...
When you have to listen to 45 minutes of Marilyn Mann...
About crap.
Yeah,
nothing.
Just mumbo
before
jumbo.
you get to this good nugget.
Right.
So,
although
anyway,
we love Marilyn Mann, it's just Marilyn out of context is just
he's just rambling. When he gets there, it's great stuff. You want to listen to it over and over again. And then the last thing I would say is don't get caught up on the technology. Don't get up on the tools. You can change that. And it is a thing that you can get on and off. You know, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep trying. That's why I still listen to stuff. That's why I still do it. That's why I'm still excited about this, that, or the other thing. Okay. So that's it. So I think that was only an hour and 20 minutes on GTD.
That's it. That's all.
And we'll do some CloudFocus app picks of the week. So here's the thing. This was like an expose. We did one on support, these
are like
special episodes.
Yeah, special episodes like the after school specials.
But I'd love to hear do people like these? Like, do they go back and they're like, yeah, I heard back from the support one. We got a lot of feedback on it.
People liked it. So people even referenced it in other places, like in the Dreamforce portal, in the MVP group. People were like, oh. So again, we love topics. Someone gave us a topic the other day that we might be, but I think we might do this once every 3 or 4 weeks, like once a month maybe. Yeah,
we'll do a full deep dive into something as opposed to just talking about what Google released, and we'll kind of go deep into an issue and talk about it. And so I hope you enjoy that. That's cool.
Although we should talk a little bit about Google Glass so that Google sends us a pair.
Yeah, Google Glass.
Do it. Send us. All right, let's get to our picks.
Go first.
So I was like, I should probably do a GTD pick, but then I decided, no, I'm not doing that.
Me too. I was the same thing, and then I went the opposite way.
Yeah. So everyone who listens to this podcast knows I'm a big sports fan, and I like a lot of different sports.
Yep.
And this was opening week for Major League Baseball.
Yes.
So I went to opening day for the New York Yankees. I also went to their second game. I've been to 2 out of the 3 Yankee games this year. And MLB has always had, they've always had a really good, they were like at the forefront. They had MLB at bat. It was like one of the first amazing iPhone apps.
Yes, it was.
Had like live radio feeds and video stuff and updated scoring. It was like so cool. So now they've branched out and they did this new app called At the Ballpark.
Okay.
And it's kind of like Foursquare for the stadium.
Okay.
So you go to a baseball stadium and you check in, and it allows you to basically blast that out to Twitter, Facebook, and Foursquare.
Right.
So it'll check in on Foursquare.
Oh, that's good.
Facebook, everything. And then aside from that, it does 2 things that I think are pretty cool. One, it gives you it gives you offers. So because I checked in, it gave me 20% off any purchase on the MLB.com shop, which is nice, right? Just a free app. I check in, you're giving me 20% off. That's kind of cool, right? And secondly, which I think is a cool thing, it's a digital journal. So it keeps track of every baseball stadium and game that you've ever been to if you check in. So
that's nice.
And you can take pictures and all sorts of fun stuff. So I know you're a big Jets fan. You go to a lot of Jets games.
Yes, I do. All of them.
And you keep all your tickets.
Yes.
This is kind of like that. I've been to this game.
Right.
I've been to this stadium. I've been here. I've been there. This is the day. This is it. It lets you put in your seat. You say, I'm at this game. I'm sitting in section 210, row 5, seat 17.
NFL should do that.
They totally should. So MLB did it. I thought it was cool. I think it's just another way to engage with fans at a game, because the going to game experience is becoming less and less enticing now that I have this 60-inch. I don't really have a 60-inch, but 46-inch flat screen HD awesome TV sitting there where with the sound system, like I feel like I'm at the game, and it's almost better than at the game, unless you really love that at the game experience.
Right.
So apps that make the game experience more interesting and more fun, I'm all about it. So thank you, MLB. It's free. It's from Major League Baseball. You can go to MLB.com and find it. We'll throw the link in
as we always do
in the notes.
So I'm going to make my pick by bringing it back to GTD, which is one of the things that I think you get from GTD at the end of it, when you become very good at it and when you get it and whatever, is that you feel very good when you're not doing anything. Like, one of the beauties of GTD is when you decide to not do anything, you feel good. because you don't have anything that's sort of running around your head and making you go crazy. So you can actually just go do something and feel awesome just sitting on a couch watching TV, or feel awesome doing whatever, because you're in control. You're in handle it. You don't have those floating around, oh my goodness, oh I forgot that moments. So I'm not a huge gamer, but I like my games. And I really just like anything that's on the iPad. And here's the reason why. I only play games on the iPad because I can do it quickly, I can do it anywhere, and basically no one will bug me. So if I play it on the big screen, like my big 47-inch TV, if I play PS3, I got other people in the house. I'm like, what are you doing? You're playing TV? I want to play. Blah, blah, blah. So you play things on the iPad, no one questions you. I could be working. I could be looking at Salesforce dashboards. You don't know. So a game that I've actually played both versions of, and this is the third version of, and it's really good. It's free, which is nice. It's called Real Racing. And it's actually put out by a company that was bought by EA, so I think it's now an EA Jam. EA Sports. Oh, I'll turn it down.
There's a sound.
Yep.
That's what it sounds like.
But it's a racing game. It's a realistic racing game. It is free. It is one of those freemium things where you get points and things and you build up and whatever. But it is just it's just fun, and it's fun to race around tracks that are realistic. It's some of the best graphics you're ever going to see on an iPad. There are all sorts of things. The one thing I want to say that is just really fascinating about this is called TSM, and it's called Time Shift Multiplayer. So what it is if Justin had Real Racing 3, which he should download because it's free, and he put it on his iPad mini. If he were to go in and we were to link up as friends, he can then go run a lap around something, and then I could then, at a different period in time, go do that same lap, and I would see him and could race against him in time shift. So meaning I would see his avatar and I'd see his whatever, and I'd be racing against his time. So you do that with your friends, which is pretty cool. But whenever the thing is connected to the internet, whenever you go in to do any race, you're always playing against time shift people. So you're basically always competing not against the computer, but you're alwa's competing other players.
Really?
It's all time shifted. So it's not real time. Yeah.
Okay.
Here's how everybody else did.
That's insane.
It's really cool. It actually, when you pull it up, it pulls down. You can see all the faces and different usernames. Sometimes the usernames are really crazy, and a lot of them are in kanji, so I don't know what they say. But anyway, so it makes the whole thing that much more fun, because every time you race,
you're not
racing against the computer.
You're not racing the computer, which is always like,
yeah, I'll beat the computer.
Yeah, or the computer just will never lose. Like one of those types of things, right?
So you can both connect with friends and really race them and really like challenge them. You can do things like, I just raced this track, and then you challenge them. I know it's been on PlayStation and PS3 for a while, but then the other thing is, whenever you go race any race, as long as you're connected to the internet, it then will, at the start of the race, it pulls down everybody else's way. And they talked about how they did it, and it's like they built it so it like has a style, and how people, even if you bump them, they'll still, it's not like on a rail, they'll still do what they were going to do. It's really, really cool. I will say it's free, but like anything, it's like you get upgraded cars, you can upgrade the things, you can do this. Lots of tracks, tons and tons of content. There's a new update coming in like a couple days I just read about. Anyway, Real Racing 3, available for the iOS, iPad, iPhone. Really, really great. Just a great game. So I totally enjoy it. It's one of those things that I had to think like, oh, it's free, so I don't want to pay any money. But I'm like, wait, you would have bought this if it was $10. So you can at least spend $10 inside the game. So, of course, I have. All right, well, that's it. Wow, it might be a record. Longest running podcast ever. Remember to go to blog.arkusinc.com for all the podcasts. You can also search on all those GTD articles we talked about. Go to Facebook. Leave us some comments on Facebook, on Twitter, on Discuss. We're in the Dreamforce portal. We're on Google+. We're all those places. We'd love to continue the conversation. There is actually a GTD group in the Dreamforce portal started by yours truly.
By you.
So, and I have posted some of my favorite stuff in there. So if you're looking for another way to find the content, in there is a great place. Look for Getting Things Done. It's a group. I don't post like every day, but every couple, especially when off season.
When you find things that are interesting,
yes.
I'm a part of the group, and I get an email.
I posted some nice videos, some YouTube, some stuff by Merlin Mann. One of his Inbox Zero is an unbelievable talk at Google. So anyway, Go enjoy that. And otherwise, we'll be back next week, although we're traveling the week after, so we have to figure out where we're going to do that one from. But we'll be next week with a new episode of CloudFocus Weekly. Until then, as always, enjoy those cloudy days.